Welcome to Epic. Thank you for tuning in. This is the keeping track where we're focusing more on keeping of animals than breeding of animals. And I've got two guests who know quite a bit about bioactive builds, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Cam, introduce yourself. What do you do? What do you make?
Hi, I'm Kamryn. I go by Cam's Reptiles on social media. I mostly just make kind of relatable content at this point, but on my YouTube channel, I'm doing a lot of focusing on enclosure builds, and I'm honestly just trying to get better and better at them. I don't claim to be the best bioactive builder in the world because I'm definitely not, but that's what I'm doing right now.
What about you, Brad? Brad, have you ever made an enclosure before?
I might have made one or two, but first of all, I got to say, Cam, you are knocking it out of the park with your build. So keep up the great work. You always got to imagine, create, and build, and keep that moving forward. Yeah, Brand's Bioactive Builds. I specialize in custom DIY reptile enclosures, animal enclosures. I really like to build it from the ground up, and I just kind of come up with ideas. I'm a firm believer if you can dream it, you can build it, and that's where I kind of just take my hands and go at it, and hope for the best.
I've seen a
And I
few of
also
your
have
videos, Brad. They're rather impressive for sure. Cam, yours too. So it's kind of cool to have both of you guys here. And bioactive, I think, it's almost a subjective term where some people consider one thing bioactive, but maybe not another. So Cam, I want to start with you. What would you consider a bioactive enclosure to begin with?
A bioactive enclosure for me is pretty simple. Honestly, just live plants, bugs, kind of just a fully functioning ecosystem that you usually don't have to do a whole lot with. That's kind of what I view bioactive as.
Brad, what do you think? Would you say the same thing, or would you have something to add?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I like adding plants to have it, be the full bioactive, along with springtails, isopods, cleanup crew, the whole nine there. I think that's its true bioactive, but I think there's a big difference between bioactive and naturalistic. Naturalistic could just be more of like background, hardscape, fake plants, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the true bioactive is going to have those live plants and the cleanup crew.
So basically, the two main things you guys would agree on: plants and then a cleanup crew underneath some sort of foliage.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think all of us know why we do bioactive. What is it about bioactive that you decided to do? Why is it that you chose to go that route with a lot of your builds, Brad?
So I love to travel, but I also work 40, 60 hours a week, and it's hard to go to the Amazon or to Australia or to Borneo, at all times. So one of the main reasons I went bioactive was to have a slice of the jungle inside my home, just so when I get home from a long, stressful day of work, I can come back and have a nice outlet just to kind of relax and just really enjoy, one, not only something that I built and created with my own two hands, but also watching the animals really enjoy the instead of just putting it into a box, right? This way it has plants, it has trees, it has enrichment, it has, it can dig through some leaf litter, it can climb a wall, it can do so much more, offering multiple, basking spots. So it has options, different temperature gradients, the whole nine. So one of the main reasons I got into building and also bioactive builds, all that kind of stuff, is one, not only for my own enjoyment, but I've really seen animals come to life once putting them into a naturalistic bioactive build. So yeah.
So, Cam, I remember at the enclosure build off in March, maybe you were just being very humble as you seem to be, but it seemed like you were a little bit more, I guess, not as experienced as someone like Brad. So, what is it that got you into bioactive?
You're definitely right. I don't consider myself to be super experienced at the enclosure build off. I was being real. Like, I did not think it was that great. But what inspired me to get started in the first place, I've been doing them for probably 3-ish years now, not very long. But as Brad mentioned, like when you're coming home from a long day or a long trip or something, like that part was part of it for me. Like, I want to be able to come home and not have to clean this enclosure the whole 9 yards. Like, I want these bugs in here to be kind of cleaning up a lot of, like, I don't know, spot cleaning that I wouldn't normally like wouldn't normally have to do that with the bugs, but if they weren't there, then I would be just scooping up poop over and over and over again. And also just that little slice of nature. I'm just a big nature lover in general. Like I love hiking and I love like nature photography and animal photography. So just having that like piece of nature in your house was something super appealing to me. And like when you missed it, it smells like rain in there. Just that kind of thing.
Well, I think you touched on something that I didn't think to ask, but now I think a lot of people would be wondering. And by the way, I thought your enclosure build was great. I just mean you seemed very humble in your assessment of your own build. But you were talking about how you'd be cleaning up poop for days if it weren't for the cleanup crew. Some people think that you still have to do a bunch of cleanup. Some people think you have to do no cleanup. Where would you think it lies? Like, how much easier is it than a regular enclosure can?
It's definitely somewhere in the middle. I definitely wouldn't say you don't have to do any cleaning at all because that's just not accurate. But I'd say somewhere in the middle. I honestly don't find myself having to clean that often. It's kind of just like a spot cleaning. Like if there's a gigantic, massive mess somewhere, you can clean that up. But in general, like replacing the substrate, you won't have to do that as often in a bioactive enclosure versus a non-bioactive enclosure.
That's fair. So, Brad, you make gigantic enclosures. Some of your enclosures are the size of the bedroom that I had when I was a kid. How does that affect the way you do bioactive builds? Clearly, you have to do some sort of cleanup, but how much do you think it saves you in terms of time and effort?
You know, it all depends on the species and the animal that I have going in. I know with my larger verandas, like my coming eye, even like the Mertens behind me, I'm doing spot cleaning, you know, once a day, once every other day. My blue tree monitor enclosure, though, I rarely have to go in there and do any kind of cleaning. I mean, the isopod colony in there is just so it's huge. There's probably thousands of them in there. Literally, it goes to the bathroom, and 2 hours later, it's gone. Now, granted, if we all know sometimes monitor lizards, they can projectile a little bit. If that happens, well, now you're cleaning the glass a little bit. But yeah, so it all really just depends on the animal species itself. And then it's also trying to figure out, you know, like my Varanus coming eye, having a drainage layer in there so I can get some of that beneficial bacteria down below, but also he digs a lot, right? So how do I keep it separate? So kind of creating a false subfloor, but that also created a spot for, you know, springtails to kind of go and gather, which they can kind of come up and help clean and get that colony growing a little bit stronger too.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. I get a blue tree monitor too, smaller than yours, but I've never seen poop in the enclosure ever unless it's on the glass. It's just completely gone. But you made a comment about how you have hundreds and hundreds of cleanup crew insects in their isopods. Do you think there's ever a time where there's too many isopods? Have you ever run into that, or is that something you can just let them run rampant?
So I started with a little 16-ounce deli cup of powder orange and another 16-ounce deli cup of dairy cows. And they have just grown to the point where, like I said, I have thousands. But to my knowledge, they self-regulate as well. So they won't produce more than what they can eat. So if food supply isn't crazy abundant, they're not going to keep producing as fast as, you know, as if there's a whole bunch of food there for them to eat.
So, Cam, do you ever try to reproduce your own isopods or maybe even springtails, or do you just let them kind of colonize in one enclosure and then move them from one enclosure to the next enclosure?
I had actually tried to reproduce my own isopods outside of the enclosure for the longest time. I had probably like 12 species or something like that because they're just honestly a lot of fun to keep. I loved keeping the different kinds and seeing how many I could keep and kind of comparing how fast they breed versus like some of the really, really slow guys that just take forever. I was really interested in that. Unfortunately, I had literally every single one of them crash randomly. I don't know what happened, of course. But what was the question again?
Do you ever try to proactively breed them, or do you just take them from one established enclosure to the next one?
I would say I usually breed them outside of the enclosure and then put them into enclosures as I see fit.
So, Brad, with your giant colony and your blue tree monitor enclosure, do you move them around, or do you have like sub colonies, or how do you do it?
So that colony I use that to seed all my other enclosures, that one or my Aki build. I was breeding them for a little bit, but it got to a point where I didn't need to. I mean, like literally I lift up, a piece of cork bark and I just dump it into the freshly, built enclosure and let that kind of, take its course and go from there.
Yeah, I've got these Fiji banded iguanas where every time I move anything in the enclosure, it looks like an infestation of these mini orange little critters. It's hilarious to see, but that's exactly what I do too. I just seed them. I had the same thing with Cam where some of my colonies just crashed, and then I'm just like, okay, I'm done with this. So I seed them that way. So the Aki build, obviously, some people don't even know that you can do a bioactive with a more arid habitat. So how do you do that? Like, how do you take care of the isopods and the springtails and more arid habitat in comparison to something that's more tropical?
Yeah, so I love a good challenge. And people told me that I couldn't put isopods in an arid build, right? So that told me I got to figure out a way around this. So what I did is I took sphagnum moss and I buried it down in the substrate. And I marked it just with a piece of cork bark so I knew where it was. And I'll go ahead and I'll water the sphagnum moss and create microclimates for all the isopods. That build itself probably has the most isopods out of any of my enclosures in this reptile room.
So, okay, I have many questions about this. How did you even think to do this, first of all?
Well, I knew that they would need some kind of moisture. And so I'm like, well, sphagnum moss, it'll hold some moisture. And then I had to figure out, okay, I know I'm going to bury this somewhere and I'm going to forget where I put it. So I just started marking with the cork bark. And it works well.
And
now also too, Adam, is deep substrate's going to help.
That was my next question. How deep are we talking here?
Yeah, so I think it's about 12 inches in the back and about 8 to 10 in the front. Okay. So it kind of scales back just to create some depth, but yeah.
Okay. Cam, have you ever done an arid setup or are you mostly tropical? Yeah, me too. I get it. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I have a bearded dragon that I wanted to do a bioactive build for, and I don't know, it just kind of seems impossible for me. But that, and like the second a bug comes out of the dirt, he's gonna eat it like that.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to have the huge colony where, like Brad was saying, I've had Aki monitors too, and I've done substrate that was deep, but clearly not deep enough, and I could just never make it work. But I've got this Kimberly rock monitor trio that I want to build an enclosure for, and I'll be definitely taking inspiration from both of you on how to do that. And I think that's what I'll do is just a much deeper litter dam and see how it works. So you guys have several enclosures that you've made over the years and you've documented them and then we've all seen them. What's your favorite build that you've ever done, Brad? Let's start with you. I know that you've raised your eyebrows because you've got too many to think about, but I want to know because they are pretty incredible, including the one behind you.
Yeah, so I mean, I like them all for different reasons, but if I had to choose one, which hasn't got as many views on YouTube, it was also one of my newer videos, it's probably my blue tree, just because that was something that really allowed me to break free outside of the box of normal thinking and just kind of start piecing together things. And I think that's the build that really made me start to try and come up with new features, new ideas, new approaches, the whole nine, which kind of launched every build after. And it's also hard to say, Adam, because you learn something from every single build that you do, right? It's like, okay, right when I finish a build, I'm like, I could have done this different, But the cool thing about that is, well, we get the next build to try that out in. But aside from the blue tree, I'd have to say it's this one right behind me, the Mertens build. It's definitely a dream project. It's got the viewing window down below with the 300 gallons of water. I got cichlids. I have archer fish. I have the Mertens up top. I got the nest box. I got the tree. Got the waterfall, the foggers. I got a lot going on in there. And just coming down, like I said, at the end of a long workday and just kind of detaching, breaking free of any thought coming in and just observing the animals do their natural behaviors is so cool. And I actually had them in my Aki enclosure for a little bit because they were starting to get too big for their grow out. No breeding behaviors whatsoever. Literally, the minute I put them in here, within a week, they were locking up. Wow. So it just goes to show like the naturalistic, vibe that can offer the animals, what it does for them too. And that's probably why it's one of my favorites, because I've really seen their natural behaviors come to life in here.
That's a great point. So, Cam, what have you noticed since you've started doing bioactive enclosures in comparison to something that isn't bioactive? For example, you have a bearded dragon in a more normalistic enclosure. What would you say the biggest differences are with the personalities and the behaviors of animals that are in bioactive builds?
I actually noticed two really massive things. One is surprisingly their appetite increases. I'm not sure why that is, but I've noticed with my guys in the more fully planted enclosures and bioactive enclosures that it just seems like they're happier overall, and then they feel safer to eat more potentially. I notice a lot more activity, like for my crested gecko, for example, every single time I've updated anything bioactive, or before when he wasn't in a bioactive enclosure, he was super boring and didn't move around a lot, didn't do anything. But now he's been in a bioactive enclosure forever now. And he's jumping around in there every night. Like I hear the leaves rustling and just a lot of activity. And I notice that with a lot of my reptiles is appetite and activity.
So, animals that almost seem boring, if you look at the comment section, seem a little bit less boring with their behavior. Is that kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Brad, you obviously had the Mertens locking up, which is pretty incredible. You don't really see too many of those being bred in captivity. So, I really hope that
Hmm.
works out for you. That's going to be cool. What else have you seen in your many bioactive builds that's different in comparison to a normal grow out or something like that?
So when I have them in grow outs, I study them, and I'll put just like random small features in their grow outs and see what they're utilizing, and I'll amplify that on a much larger scale in their forever home. So I guess it's cool to kind of see like what they use in a grow out, and then see them transfer that over to their larger, forever home. I've definitely seen, it just seems like the animal comes to life, right? It from going from just having sticks, like a log going across, and maybe a shelf or something like that, to having a naturalistic looking tree, and having a waterfall. I mean, even just having the waterfall, I don't know if the camera is, it's flipped, but yeah, right behind me here, like they'll go right from it and drink right from the waterfall. Like that's their main place where they drink from, which is some stuff I never would have seen if it was just a normal, here's a 4x2x2 or something, right? And with the heat rock, which don't use heat rocks if you're watching this.
Agreed.
So yeah. So I think it's just really the animal comes to life. You get to really see some of it, the natural beauty that the animal would naturally display in the wild.
Yeah, I think that's I think what we're all kind of going for with all the enclosures that we do, especially now bioactive being the main thing, is trying to get them to be the most naturalistic. You both said that you want to be in a jungle, and now you're bringing a jungle to you. Well, you want the animals to act like they're in a jungle too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you guys, I think you have more plans to build. I'm not asking you what your next build is, but if you could have a dream build, there's no money stopping you, there's no space stopping you. What would you build, and what animal would you build it for? Cam, I want to hear from you first.
I would really, really love a legit like paludarium, like legit, like massive, like taking up this whole entire wall. And I have a semi-aquatic snake. I have a rhino rat snake. He's in this enclosure down here that you can barely see. I would love to put him in something like that, but that's a pipe dream at this point.
That's awesome. I've got some rhino rat snakes. I've been building this paludarium for two years now, but eventually it will get done. I promise. It's going to be cool to see.
Yes.
Brad, what about you? What's your dream build?
So go big or go home. T-Rex or a raptor, right?
So, what if you had to make it for an animal that didn't require a time machine? What would you pick then?
Okay. Definitely a croc monitor. Yeah, croc monitor would be my go-to, because you can have that paludarium experience. You can add that in there if you want. You can have some pretty cool trees. You can have a cool rock background. You kind of get pretty much like all of the elements that you'd want to put in there, and just kind of make it look super epic.
Plus, croc monitors might be the coolest lizards on the planet. Everyone's all goo goo over Komodo dragons because Komodo dragons are cool. They're the biggest lizard, but croc monitors might be longer and they're arboreal and they look more like a dinosaur than anything else.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think I got to mess with one at Nerd this week. I can't wait to put that video out. It's going to be super fun. But
Oh, that's awesome.
it was the coolest animal ever. It was a cool experience. But I don't know if I'd ever keep one. I'm going to leave that to the professionals. But Brad, I think that you got a lot of granite, so that might be the next step for you. And you're sitting in front of a paludarium right now. Cam, you just mentioned that you want to build a paludarium. That seems like a big new trend too that we didn't really see a lot of 5 or 10 years ago. So Cam, you want to build a paludarium. Why? What is it that's alluring to you? And how would you make it bioactive?
Oh, I haven't even honestly had a whole lot of time to think about how I would make it happen, just because it's just kind of unrealistic for me right now. But I wanted to build one initially specifically for my rhino rat snake, because I was kind of going back and forth. Like, I had a small little water bowl in there for a long time, just in his regular bioactive enclosure, and it was just a water bowl. I was like, he can swim in that. And then I was like, he's getting really big, and he's like barely fitting in there anymore. So I bought like a 5 or 10 gallon shrimp tank from like PetSmart or something. And it's like clear on all sides. And I like dug a really big hole in the dirt in the enclosure. And that was kind of my way of getting at least like a bigger area of water, not like a full paludarium vibe, but at least there was an actual like pond almost. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But yeah, future paludarium builds has not been very well researched. I have no idea how you would make that bioactive. Maybe Brad could shed some light.
Well, I think, yeah, because you're sitting in front of a paludarium, Brad, that is bioactive, right? So you obviously did a bunch of enclosures that weren't paludariums, and then now you have this one. What is it about the paludarium or I guess, how would you make it bioactive? Like, there was obviously a challenge there. How did you overcome the challenge?
So even if you're building it from scratch, even just making waterfall features that would go down to the water portion, whatever the case may be, it has a mind of its own. So you got to expect the worst and plan for it is really what it comes down to. Know how everything's running is going to run with gravity as it comes down a waterfall, or, if you're separating the water from the land area with the divider, you just want to make sure that's 100% watertight. And bioactivity, I mean, you can still put in, isopods, springtails. Springtails, they'll just float. You'll lose a couple of isopods, but as they keep, breeding, they'll keep reproducing. But some of the isopods will actually go down, walk around for a little bit, then walk right back out. I've put in shrimp in some of my bioactive enclosures in the water portion. They kind of help clean the gravel and, just, I guess it would be the equivalent of an isopod, just a shrimp. And you got to have fun with it. That's really what it comes down to, And for me, my first paludarium, it was an utter failure. But what I did is I learned from that experience. I learned where I went wrong, and I tried to make corrective measures as I went forward.
So you're sitting in front of, I don't know how big that enclosure is, your room-sized paludarium. The one that failed, what was that one, and how did it change over time? What is it that you learned in a nutshell? Like, we don't have 3 hours here. I'm sure you could go on forever, but what you've learned through all your builds, but what were the main things you took away?
Yeah, so spray foam is not a watertight barrier. That's it in a nutshell.
Can confirm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Overbuild. Whatever you do when it comes to water, just overbuild. If you think it's good enough, take it one step further.
And what was the enclosure that you built first? What was the paludarium for?
It was for dart frogs. It was just a very small water section, and it was a 36-18-24 Exoterra.
Okay. So you're standing in front of a thing that you built, like from scratch, from pieces of wood. Cam, is that something you've ever thought about doing, is making your own, maybe for your rhino rat snakes, or is it glass boxes that you buy off a shelf? What do you prefer to do?
I don't know the first thing about building an actual enclosure, to be completely honest. I really like my Zen habitats. Those are one of my favorite enclosures I've ever had. I don't love glass enclosures. I just don't love how they look, like the fully glass enclosures. Of course, if I were to do like a spray foam build, the glass ones work really well. But yeah, I don't know anything about building an enclosure.
Brad, what about you?
What was the question? I apologize.
So you're building most enclosures now, but you've done enclosures that are glass boxes that you've bought off a shelf, basically. What are the main differences, I guess, rather than your favorite things? I think I know which one's your favorite to do. What are the main differences from starting from scratch and then buying something and then outfitting it?
Yeah, so I like building myself. I can customize it 100% to my liking, to my needs, to fit the room perfectly, build trapdoors if I want to. But then one of the benefits of buying something off the shelf is it's going to save you some time. You just go to the store, pick it up, come home, get some spray foam, do whatever you got to do, and go to town. So, I definitely would, to Cam's point, building something from scratch. The first time I did it, I was like, what am I doing here, right? But the hardest part is that first piece of wood that you're going to cut. After that, it just kind of keeps moving. Then once again, you keep learning from it. So, yeah.
So the building materials that you use, Brad, I've seen a lot of wood in your enclosures. You use PVC. That's something that this is purely a selfish question because I'm about to build 4 enclosures. What is it about the PVC sheets versus the plywood sheets? If you're making an enclosure, can you use both? Is one superior to the other? Does the plywood fall apart? What advice would you give?
Yeah, so I've switched up the game a little bit depending on the style build I'm going to be doing. But to answer your question, PVC, it's going to hold heat and humidity much better, and it's not going to break down over time. Versus wood, stuff's going to escape. I mean, yeah, you can put, dry lock on it or, finish it off with some kind of finisher, but eventually it's going to fall apart, PVC is nearly indestructible. Today, if it's a big build, I'll use a little bit of a hybrid. I'll use mainly PVC, but to make it structurally sound, I'll frame it out with 2x4s.
Okay, so you kind of hybridize and use both, basically.
Yeah, for my larger builds, yeah.
Cam, if you wanted to give someone advice, they're doing their very first bioactive build ever. They're starting from scratch and they say, I don't even know what to do. What advice would you give them?
They wouldn't even know what to do, like starting bioactives like completely fresh kind of thing.
Yeah, like they've never made anything ever before. They've watched some videos, but they've never really done it. And they're coming in your Instagram DMs and they're saying, hey, look, I watch your channel. I like what you do. How do you do it? What advice do you have for me?
I just like to take things like step by step. And obviously I make pretty simple bioactives compared to that one down there.
That's okay. Well, hey, I make simple ones too. I totally get it. I understand.
Yeah. No, I love it too. But I think it's easier for my brain to just take things step by step, like from the bottom to the top. So, depending on the type of species that you're keeping, just research what kind of substrates would work the best. I make my own, but obviously if you're just starting off from scratch, there are so many amazing bioactive, like complete substrates right off the bat. And then look up the easiest isopods to keep. In my opinions, I love the powder blues and like the powder oranges. I think those guys just explode. They're not very hard to keep at all. That and like the cookie crumbles are one of my favorites too, or Oreo crumbles, whatever they're called. But yeah, kind of just like taking the bioactive process step by step, and you can really break it into just substrate, the cleanup crew that you're using, and the plants, and kind of expand from there.
So the substrate mix that you use, because I think a lot of people want the most simple way of making things their own rather than buying everything off the shelf. And I think substrate's a really great way to start with kind of making your own DIY. So what do you use? Is it a certain mixture? Is there certain percentages? Do you eyeball it? Do you weigh it? How do you do it?
I just recently started making my own, just like a couple of enclosures. I just started like probably within the last couple of months. But you can basically buy everything that goes into the substrates that you'd get Reptile branded and pretty much do it all yourself. Obviously, it depends on if you're going for a more arid or tropical substrate, which for me, everything is just easier tropical. Arid, I just really struggle. But I just buy everything off Amazon, like organic topsoil, play sand, cocoa fiber. There's like a mushroom mix, like mushroom fungal mix or something like that. I'm coming out with a YouTube video on it.
I can't wait to see it.
Just off. I'm just like off the whim. I don't remember all the ingredients.
So you're kind of making like a potion in a bucket basically and just mixing it all together.
Yeah, I have like a gigantic one of those like black moving bins from Home Depot, and I just like pour all of the stuff in it. Basically, like I found a loose recipe on Reddit, and it was just like one part of this, two part of this, whatever. I don't weigh anything. I don't measure anything. Kind of for me, it's just a lot of eyeballing. But if it says one part, then I usually try and keep those parts equal in my to my eyes.
So I remember when I first started getting into this and I'd hear people talk about add this, 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 this. And I would think, how do these people afford all those things? And now I kind of understand with Substrate anyway, you're actually kind of saving money because you can make bigger batches for the same amount of money as buying one bag of pre-made. But my next question for Brad is, how do you keep the cost down in making these colossal structures?
I don't. Watch my YouTube channel. Help me make money. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, luckily I partnered up with Zoopoxy, Polygem Zoopoxy, so they've been able to help me out just a little bit. But other than that, I mean, I buy in bulk. That's the only way I found to really cut down on price is, I know I'm going to need, a whole bunch of cork bark at some point, so I'll just buy a whole bunch of cork bark. Yeah. Yeah, other than that, I mean, it's a very expensive hobby to be in. So, and plus, I mean, even when I finish a build, I mean, there's probably 15% of waste too, of like I made a bad cut or I measured something wrong or whatever the case may be. So now I'm running back to the hardware store, so picking up more material and doing all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that's an important thing that you said because I've renovated houses or built enclosures or anything like that. And it always seems like the guy who did it in 15 minutes on the video, you don't see that it took you 270 days or however long that one took you, and how many bad cuts you made and how many times you had to go back to the hardware store. So I guess how long did it take you to get as good as it looks like you are now? When you first started versus now, how long did it take you to refine those skills so that you're not going through as much waste, not going through the hardware store every 10 minutes?
Yeah, measure twice, cut once. And sometimes measure three times and cut once. But so I don't really have too much of a crazy background with carpentry, anything like that. I'm pretty much all self-taught. But I deep dive, and like Cam was saying, even when it comes down to the substrate, do your research. Same thing when it comes to building. Do your research, find deals, whatever the case is. And I mean, like Adam, some of the builds I do now take longer, but it would have taken me 2 years ago a lot quicker. But I also have two kids now, and it's like, okay, that's taking up a lot of time, and running back and forth helping out the wife and all that kind of stuff. But I will say the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But with every build that I do, I try to add one or two new features to it that I've never done before, so it's uncharted territory. So therefore, I mean, I'm looking at it going, okay, here's my idea, this is going to be my approach. I don't know if it's going to work out or not. Luckily, 9 times out of 10, it does. But for the times it doesn't, well, now I have a mess that I need to clean up and cut into and reformat and try and come up with a solution.
Well, I think that's the same thing with everything, but it looks pretty impressive when you put together a 15-minute video and it's like, wow, this guy's really good at this.
Yeah. And to that point then there too, yeah, that's one thing with YouTube, right? You watch a 10-minute, 15, 20-minute video, it's like, oh, I could never do that. Yeah, but you're not seeing the F-bombs dropped here and there when you're messing up, or all the mistakes that you make along the way. And I think that's a video I'm going to come out with sometime soon. It's just like the mistakes I've made, because I make a lot of mistakes in every single build. It's just, what am I going to do to correct them to make this thing work?
I'll be the first person to watch that video. I'm always interested to see how the sausage is actually made. And, I've made 700 YouTube videos of my own, but I've never made a room-sized structure. So it's always interesting to me how other people get through the struggles that come with that job too. But just to switch gears all the way around, you've got big lizards, Brad, whereas Cam, I know you've got some snakes like your rhino rat snake. So with plants, which is the first thing we talked about, having plants in an enclosure is what partly makes it a bioactive enclosure. Snakes destroy plants. Cam, how do you keep the plants alive while keeping your snakes happy by putting them in there?
I try to stick with sturdy plants for him. He is my only snake, so I haven't experienced too many other like truly heavy-bodied snakes and the plants to get around that. But snake plants are my go-to. I mean, it's in the name. They're pretty sturdy and they grow really fast and they get really thick. So I haven't had any issue with my snake destroying a snake plant. I've also got like a monstera back there, and you can't see, but one of the leaves is like completely fallen over and cracked. So I'm very obviously trying to figure out plants that work for snakes as well. But snake plants are my go-to, and that monstera is pretty okay.
So would you say, because I would say probably it's easier to keep most lizard species in bioactives without destroying everything than it would be for snakes. Would you also agree?
Yeah, probably. I have a lot easier time keeping my little tiny lizards in their bioactive enclosure with their perfect plants. But my blue tongue skink, for example, his enclosure looks terrible right now because all of the plants are crushed and dead because he like dug underneath the plant and uprooted them, so they're dead.
Yeah, been there. I understand. I think that's why I like dart frogs so much because I don't know if I like dart frogs. I just like plants with animals inside. They just nothing ever happens bad. It's always fantastic. Where Brad, if Cam's having issues with their blue tongue skink and you've got a coming eye and you've got the Mertens, how do you keep the plants alive with these animals that are so big?
Yeah, well, first of all, an enclosure is never going to look as good as it does day one before putting the animal in. After that, I mean, it is keeping up with even just with, the plants that they do destroy. And I found safety in numbers helps, right? Overplanting, throwing a whole bunch in there and letting them kind of compete for the light. And that helps, stimulate new growth, all that kind of stuff. My blue tree monitor enclosure, the plants are still doing great. My veranda's coming. I mean, he's 5.5 foot right now. I knew one day that he was going to destroy all those plants, which yes, he has at this point. But that also kind of helps with the whole enrichment aspect too, because now I get to pull everything out, put new substrate in, and I'm going to build a whole tree inside of there for him. And I will end up most likely using fake plants just to kind of get some more foliage, and then trying to, hang some more, I guess, sturdy plants, hardier plants in places that he doesn't go to, just so it can grow. And it really comes down to placement as well with those kinds of things. The Mertens enclosure, most of them are fake because I learned from the Varanus coming eye. And I mean, these things are all over the place. I mean, they're pretty chill right now, but I mean, they explore their enclosure 24/7. So with that being said, I mean, trying to keep a plant out of the way with as much water as I have in there, everything going on, it was inevitable that they would just destroy it. So,
Yeah, they seem like they're always moving around. I assume the lights would probably be off right now if you weren't doing this. And I see one of them moving around like as we're doing this right now, way past their bedtime, it seems like.
kind of, yeah. So my lights go off at like 1 a.m, but they don't turn on until 1 p.m.
Yeah. So why do you do that?
So because if they went off at like 7:30, I get home 5 o'clock, and then I'd have 2 hours, 2.5 hours to do feedings and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to make sure that when I do feed them, they're able to digest their food, underneath a good basking spot. And it just really fits my schedule more because I stay awake till 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, just building in here, doing random stuff. So yeah, fits my schedule.
Okay. So, and just to stay with you there, we talked about plants a whole bunch, and Kane was saying her favorite was snake plants, which I also very much love. I know it depends on the build, but if there was one plant that is your go-to for your builds, which one is it?
Money tree, umbrella plant. They're hardy. They look good. They grow well for bigger enclosures. For the smaller enclosures, ficus is nice. It really depends, a lot of times, Adam, I just go to Home Depot or Menards or Lowe's and see what they got, and I throw stuff in and see what makes it. Yeah.
Me too.
Well, I have a rather selfish question again, because I'm just kind of like picking your brain so that my enclosures look better next week when I start making them. But for the plants that go in the ground, I think everyone knows how to do that. Everyone's potted plants with their mom when they were 6. It's pretty easy. Doing plants that don't go into a natural substrate like that, or putting them in rock crevices. Brad, I've seen you do this before, but I'm going to ask Cam first. Do you have experience with putting plants in places that aren't the dirt? And if so, do you have any advice on how to do that?
I do not. I think I tried doing that for the first time at the build competition and it epically failed.
So what made it fail? Why do you think it failed? And why do you think that?
I think I just had a really hard time with the spray foam, and I blame the spray foam.
Okay.
And I just couldn't get them to stay. Yeah.
You all said
So
4 hours.
I know.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible to do 4 hours. I think that Cody and Brad had the right idea and just kind of like bring most of the build and then just kind of touch it up. It's a very difficult thing. We're putting one together for October. I'm really excited for it. But Brad, I've seen I watched that video of the enclosure right behind you like very recently, and you're putting, I think it was that build anyway, some plants not necessarily in substrate, but in rock crevices and things like that. What advice would you have for people who, like myself, say, yeah, I've done that, and they always die?
Well, I mean, Adam, you just put out a video. I want to say it was for one of your Fiji banded iguanas that you took the fishing line, you wrapped it around some sphagnum moss and kind of stuck it to the wall that way, which, I mean, as long as the roots are being hydrated, your chances of success are pretty good. But what I typically like, and I'm going to have to try that, mark my words to it.
It works great with some plants, not others. Let me know which ones you're thinking of, because I can tell you the ones that don't work for sure.
All right, I'll shoot you a message later. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I usually just take, plant holders, put it right to the wall, spray foam over it, or, even with Polygem Zoopoxy, you could just make a plant holder right there. The important part I found is making sure you drill a hole in the bottom so you don't waterlog the roots and have it all go bad that way. That way it has the ability to drain.
So for automation, I think that's a big thing with Bioactive too. The whole thing with Bioactive, some people use the word lazy. I don't think any of us are trying to be lazy with it, with not picking up poop and all the rest of it, but just making it more efficient so that you can have really cool builds and it doesn't take all your time to maintain them. What do you do to automate your enclosures to make your life easier? Cam, let's start with you.
I use smart timers. Everything in this room is connected to a smart timer, just like a regular home smart timer that you would hook your lights up to, or your TV or whatever if you wanted to turn off at a certain time. I use that same exact thing. All of like my foggers and my misters are all usually separate so that they can go off at nighttime or daytime depending on the animal. So I have like different smart home timers for different things, and everything works really smoothly.
So are you using the app for each timer, or do you put everything into like Google Home so everything's all together and it's easier to monitor? How do you do it?
So the brand is Wise. It's basically like a Google Home type system. So all of the separate timers are all in the app, and I can basically control all of their times. If I want them to all have the same time, I can adjust them there. Or if like one specific timer needs to go off at a specific time, that can be done too. And it's super, super nice.
Misters, foggers, timers. That's my expertise also. I have nothing else to add. But Brad, how do you do it? You've got all sorts of different stuff going on with just one enclosure and all your enclosures. How do you do it?
Automation, 100%. I mean, there's no other way I'd be able to do it, especially with working and building, like working on builds, to run around and, hand mist everything, turn on the lights for everything, turn off the lights for everything. It would just, I'd go nuts. I'd spend all day doing that. But yeah, Mist King, I love it. It works great. The only thing is just remembering to fill the reservoir, so it doesn't go dry. I actually saw a video from you probably, it's got to be 4 or 5 years ago now, Gobi smart plugs. Mm-hmm. And that's what I use in the reptile room. Makes it really, really easy to manage. You just plug in, how frequently you want something to go off, the times, and make it work. So I realistically don't touch anything in the reptile room when it comes to, anything electric.
Yeah, I do the same sort of thing. That video that you watched 4 or 5 years ago, I have the exact same protocol. I've not changed it. Google Home actually came out with something that allows you to schedule it so that the lights go on half an hour before the sun rises and then off, which is what I do now, and it helps me cycle all my North American species. But either way, neither here nor
Hmm.
there. I'm curious with the Mist King, because I literally have water filling right now, so I can fill a Mist King that went dry last night that I noticed. So how do you do all your enclosures? Do you have one big Mist King system that feeds multiple? Do each one have their own mist system? How does it work for you?
So I'm condensing everything from the house and I'm bringing it all down to the reptile room, except for my Colotes. He's going to stay upstairs. So I will be able to condense it all down to one Mist King, although I have to. Yeah, I'll just run lines all throughout the whole reptile room. And then I also have a calendar to where I mark it like, hey, fill up the reservoir, because I pretty much know a day or two before it's going to go when I see it on the calendar. Other than that, I mean, it'll go dry.
So are you using like a big trash barrel, or are you still using like a 5 gallon bucket?
5 gallon bucket, distilled water.
Holy cow,
Yep.
dude. I
Yeah.
have a 20 gallon trash can and I can barely keep that thing filled. But I guess that's my question, because I've got the enclosure, or the box says that it can support up to 50 nozzles. I've got 48 nozzles on mine. How many nozzles do you have for your entire room if you're doing it off one pump?
Oh, geez. Come back to me. I'll count.
Okay, so
I'd say somewhere around, like, not nearly as many as 48, probably around 30 as far as like the nozzles themselves.
okay.
Maybe more if I'm just kind of going off of a rough number.
Okay, so this brought up a whole bunch of other questions that I have. So, Cam, for you, do you ever cycle your bioactive enclosures and your animals based on what their native range would be? So, for example, Brad has a blue tree monitor, so it'd be rainy season for half the year, and then it's two separate increments. Do you do that with your animals, where you do that, or is it just kind of the same thing all year round?
I would love to get more into kind of the weather cycling with what you're talking about. But the extent of that is I usually just change the lighting schedules depending on where they're native to. And that's pretty much as far as I've gotten. I've seen really, really amazing automations for rain and like people that set up like thunderstorms in their reptile room and stuff. That would be amazing. And definitely in the future, I would definitely love to do something like that.
Yeah, thunderstorms look great on camera. I do those for camera, but I never do them for any other reason. But Brad, yeah, they do look cool. They look great. I love doing them for the intros. They look great. It's retention. If you want retention, that's what you do, is have some thunder.
You don't enjoy it in person?
I don't think it's good for the animals. I think it stresses them out, and and that's my personal opinion. But yeah, I'm not a scientist by any means. But Brad, I guess the same sort of question. Like, do you have any sort of, especially when you're breeding your animals, do you try to cycle them with their native habitat or no?
Not necessarily with their native habitat. I go with my local habitat, Chicagoland. We have summer, fall, winter, the whole nine. So you get the different temperature fluctuations within itself there. And when the humidity spikes a little bit more, I'll actually run the Mist King more frequently, just to kind of simulate, the wet season, dry season, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I do too. I think that's super cool. It's something I've always wanted to do, and to be able to do it with automation is the cat's pajamas, if you ask me. Now, we've got 2 minutes left, so I want to give you each a minute to tell me about what your next project is. If you want to tell me how much detail, how much you don't, because I know you're probably making YouTube videos. Cam, what's your next build? What's it for, and what's so special about it?
I do not have any specific builds planned at the moment. However, I have an empty 3-foot enclosure that I have been just kind of brainstorming what to do with it, what species to get and put in it. And obviously that'll be a pretty cool YouTube video, but yeah, no solid plans right now.
You've got empty enclosure syndrome.
Yes, it's been empty for, I think, like almost a year now, I think.
Yeah, I understand totally. I think all of us who are watching understand the empty enclosure syndrome. Brad, being that you don't have any empty enclosures and you make everything from scratch, you always have the animal first, I imagine. Do you want to share with us what your next build is?
So, yeah, I'm actually, like I said, I'm rearranging the reptile room right now. So I'm just kind of making a couple of shelves, all that kind of stuff, just to make it more user friendly, which is actually creating more room in the reptile room by bringing stuff in because I'm building up. And, as I kind of said earlier, the Mertens, they locked up. So I'm going to bank on them actually going the distance and, you know, having good eggs, all that kind of stuff. So I have a pretty cool, and this is an Epic exclusive. So just know that, Epic and everybody watching. I really want to create a really cool grow out for Mertens, but I'm also a realist, and I know that once they start going quite frequently. So I want to, once again, kind of maximize, you know, the space that I have, maximize the space. So I'm going to kind of do like bunk beds almost with enclosures. And I have some pretty cool ideas with how I'm going to make that happen while still having a drain, water feature, make it into a paludarium. So these Mertens get a taste of naturalistic, you know, living while having a really cool setup. And I'm really excited about that video. Now, I don't know how I'm going to get it from here to, you know, in the reptile room. I guess we'll see if it's a success or not. But I have some pretty cool ideas with it. And then we'll see what happens at Tinley here in a few days, whether or not I'm going to come home with an animal. And if that's the case, you'll just have to stay tuned to the channel to see what my next big build is going to be.
Fair enough. Well, hey, you heard it here first on Epic. And I want to say thanks to both of you. Thanks, Cam. Thanks, Brad, for being part of this. Thanks for being part of my build-off last year, by the way. You guys saved the day so much. I appreciate it. And all of you who watch, thank you so much for watching Epic, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the talks.